Good morning, America. This is Hubert Johnson with Taxes Made Easy. It's Friday, and again, we're coming up on a couple of tax deadlines here. The main one is the October 15th extension for your personal taxes. If you haven't filed your personal taxes yet, past time to get on them and get that taken care of. Our main topic of the day, however, we're going to talk about estate planning and how that can help not only with your personal taxes, but with your corporate taxes, and help save you from and save your assets that you accumulate from IRS, from bankruptcy, from other issues. So, again, we'll be right back after this short break, but we've got a lot of news to cover too. A lot of stuff has come out, and good and bad. So, we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, everybody. And we're just going to take a quick dive into the news. There's a lot to cover today, as always. First article here is something that's happening live. This is from Yahoo News, and this is Hurricane Helene. So already we have 3 million people without power. At least 4 deaths have already been reported across these states. So it hit Florida, and now it's moving north and really dumping in Georgia and the Carolinas, especially. You can see right now it's over the Carolinas. So 3 million people without power across Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas as it made landfall late last night. So it was a Category 4 storm. So now it's a weakened tropical storm, not officially a hurricane, but still bringing plenty of devastation. Flooding reported up and down Florida's coast with record surge levels. In the Tampa area, storm surges up to 20 feet. So if you know anybody from that area, please be safe. Please be careful. Check in with them. I'm sure the IRS will announce this as another disaster area and give people time to comply with different requirements or filing deadlines. But again, just be aware that this is a huge issue affecting the Southeast right now. Next article. Just happens every single year. This is an article from Money Watch, and what to expect with 2025 brackets. Now, here's the concern. This has been one of my issues across the board, is that while we have increases, the official government numbers on inflation are never as good as the actual inflation. So for 2025, it looks like they're expecting only a 2.8% increase. While the official inflation numbers are down, actual inflation is probably double or triple that. And 24, there was a 5.4% increase in the tax brackets, and in 23 a 7.1% boost in the brackets, which again was pretty high. So again, rapidly cooling inflation. I'm not sure if that's as accurate. Housing prices are still higher than ever. And we'll see what happens now that the Fed has cut rates. It could fuel inflation again. So again, this helps with bracket creep, where people's money is worth less and less, and then people all of a sudden find themselves in higher tax brackets, even though they're not able to purchase more. It just makes it harder to afford the same standard of living, and that's why they have it adjusted for inflation every single year. So again, this gives it based on the IRS numbers, how they calculate. This is what they're estimating will be the new brackets for 2025. So this news is coming out. If you're not planning for 2025, you should be. We should be making plans. We should be understanding how we did in 2024. And again, this is where tax planning comes in. This is one of the things I'm going to touch on, is that when you get ahead of the curve and you're on top of your finances, you know what's going on, you can then start planning to pay less in taxes, take advantage of deductions and legal deductions and exemptions, and save money. So again, going to move on. That's not a huge topic that we're going to cover on, but again, they're going to start talking about 25 more and more. And as we get towards the end of the year, where we're going to kind of position and focus on how do we finish 2024 off strong, but also prepare for 2025. So the IRS again is talking about ERC credits, and for the employee retention credits, if you know anybody or if you applied for the ERC, be very aware the IRS is still going after these. They are still looking for these kinds of cases, and they have a supplemental claim process, which is this is why they're announcing this. They have a new process open for payroll companies to go in and resolve incorrect claims for their clients. So if someone, you do your due diligence and say, okay, well, maybe we didn't qualify afterwards, we just want to voluntarily withdraw the claim, then you can do that, and now your third party can do that for you, and they made it easier to make sure that they're withdrawing claims from some clients and not all clients. So just some touch-up and improvement here by the IRS to being able to withdraw claims. If you legitimately qualify for it, there's no reason to withdraw those claims. But again, definitely something to consider here. So moving to the next tab, Biden signs stopgap funding to prevent pre-election government shutdown. This is not a surprise. The House pushed through, and the Senate quickly ratified a resolution to keep the government up through mid-December. And so I want to thank both houses of Congress for this bipartisan agreement and for avoiding the costly government shutdown. I have my opinion on this. It's costly to continue to spend like crazy. The fact that we were spending $2 trillion more than we bring in this year without the excuse of a national emergency like COVID. And COVID, I had a lot of problems with how they just threw money out the door. I mean, the government caused a lot of problems with the shutdowns and lockdowns. But all the money they threw at it just caused other problems, such as inflation. So Reagan famously said one of the scariest things you can hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. This is why. And again, this is one of my biggest problems with conservatives. They talk a good game, but when it comes to actually cutting spending, they're horrible at it. Absolutely horrible. And it's a very small minority that is actually trying to cut spending across the board. So the House voted 341 to 82, and then the Senate was 78-18. The only votes against were Republicans. So small minority Republicans voting against it because they don't agree with the continued spending. But again, it's a minority of the Republican Party. So, and then they both chambers left town ahead of Hurricane Helene to get out of town, just in case it causes any problems in the DC area. So again, they passed a clean continuing resolution, means no cuts, no additions, no tweaks, just let's continue on as we are, without any adjustments to what the government's currently doing. So actually, I'm going to change up the order. On that note, the next article we're going to share is, now this isn't, to be fair, the Biden-Harris, this is $1 trillion over the last 4 years. So take it all together, over the last 4 years, $1 trillion in improper payments. So about $250 billion a year. When we're spending $2 trillion more than we're bringing in, $250 billion is a large number. It's a pretty substantial number. Now, is there always going to be fraud and abuse and waste with government spending? Absolutely. But there are bipartisan legislators saying, look, we need to get a handle on this. We need to address this. So right now, between 21 and 23, it's an estimated 801.4 billion in such payments adjusted for inflation. Now, this is probably underreported because not all federal administrations are allowed to report this. And so after this year, it's estimated that the previous 3 years they racked up 801 billion, and that they've already pretty much spent over 200 billion in improper payments, and it's expected to go over $1 trillion. How does this compare with under Trump? It's roughly it's a little bit worse. And Trump's 4 years, they estimated 814 billion in improper payments. To be fair, though, a huge chunk of that was COVID funds. The COVID funds were ripe for abuse. They were abused like crazy. And again, it's cost American taxpayers. It's cost us in inflation. The government is horrible about spending money and doing it wisely. They're absolutely horrible about it. Again, there was an article that we shared just the other day about $42 billion for expanded internet access in rural areas. And you know how many people have been connected after a year? Zero. Nobody. And 42 billion spent with absolutely nothing to show for it, because it's probably used for slush funds, it's probably used for other purposes, we're going to use it for this, and yet it gets diverted. The fraud, waste, and abuse is horrific. Again, the government is known for being absolutely inefficient, and again, the 814 under Trump, over 1 trillion under Biden. So again, they kind of break down the numbers, but it's this is a key paragraph right here. Proper payments reported by the federal government are likely underestimates, as the GOA points out that Congress hasn't given all federal programs the authority to estimate erroneous payments, and there's probably plenty of fraud schemes that go undetected. So that the real number is probably much higher. And again, Medicaid, Medicare are some of the systems that are most ripe for abuse, with about 105 billion going out a year for those. Again, estimated 1 trillion COVID-19 aid. Again, when the government comes out with a new program, new giveaways, expect lots of fraud. The OPM, Office of Personnel Management, has hundreds of millions going to dead people and prisoners. So again, it's yeah. So again, a bipartisan group of legislators are pushing in the House, are trying to do the Improper Payments Transparency Act. It would require the president's budget to identify common payment errors and formulate ways to address them. So now that the problem's so bad, some people are trying to address it, which is good. But again, they wait till the problem's really egregious. I mean, it probably should have been done 30, 40 years ago. We're out of time. We'll come back right after the break. Welcome back, everybody. We're actually going to jump to a new article, and this one is a little different than your normal article. I'm not trying to scare people when I share stories about people getting prosecuted, but this is an interesting story of Utahns and, Utah. Two Utah men and their tax business in Provo were accused and prosecuted for a tax scheme to defraud over $1 million from the U.S. government. Now, this is very rare. Usually when the federal government goes after someone, they have a lock solid case. Federal prosecutors are very careful to choose cases where there's plenty of proof, and again, mistakes are made. They don't have a 100% track record, but it's in the 90s. It's 90% or more. It's pretty high. So this is why when you're facing prosecution, make a deal. I mean, in this case, however, a federal jury ruled that they were not guilty. So, and this has to do with ERC claims. So again, they're actively prosecuting people. Be very aware of what's happening here. So charges of conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government, 13 charges, or one charge of conspiracy, 13 charges of wire fraud, and 11 charges of aiding and assisting in the filing of false tax returns. So again, this lawsuit against these two Utah men has been, I'm sure, devastating to their practice, devastating, as far as the cost to defend themselves here. And again, it's very easy. So, I mean, it's very scary to be in this kind of situation where we're being sued by the federal government. So this started in early February of 2023. They're accused of taking advantage of COVID-related tax credits, such as the ERC, for settlements between 20 and 21. So government claimed they falsified a number of employees' paid wages, sick leaves, and family leave wages. So this is why it's so important when you're doing these cases, when you're submitting for ERC, the IRS is prosecuting these. And this is a huge blow to them that they didn't get a conviction here. The federal jury unanimously disagreed with the charges. And so if you get 12 people to agree on anything, really, it's pretty remarkable. And again, the attorneys, their attorneys, because the federal government isn't going to be able to see anything. Kathleen Nestor, one of their attorneys, said that it was found on misguided assumptions, should have never been brought in the first place. So this is a new area for defendants, but also for the IRS going after people for ERC fraud. Again, the cost to them has probably been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for legal representation to represent them for a year and a half, 18 months of going through this. It's very, very crazy. And the fact that they got acquitted unanimously by the jury shows that the IRS is pursuing novel cases and going after people in a new way here. So be aware, there's real consequences out there. And even though they were acquitted, I'm sure there's jumping in the streets right now. I'm sure this has devastated their business and their livelihood as well as their personal assets. So next article, we talk about, and to be clear, I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think there's any way this is going to happen. But it's been done before. FDR famously did it when the Supreme Court kept smacking down all of his social policy programs. Because they said, look, we don't have that power as the federal government. And the federal courts kept smacking down all of his plans. Now, you can argue it turned all the federal programs that FDR pushed, delayed the recession. A lot of economists believe that it turned the Great Depression into a 10-year depression. We didn't come out of it until World War II. And even then, with the rationing and everything, things didn't really improve till after World War II. So FDR packed the court. He added more justices. I think it was from 7 to 9, and threatened that. So here, Republicans and Democrats have been fighting like crazy. There's a conservative majority on the court for the first time in a long time. So, with Trump's last presidency, he put a couple more people on the court, changed the composition of the court, and gave the conservatives a 6-3 majority, and now they want to pack the court. So it's a throwback to an old FDR initiative Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And again, it's just introduced, but this would add 6 more justices to the court and force them to retire, increase the number of justices from 9 to 15 years over the course of 12 years. And we require 2/3 of the High Court rather than a simple majority to overturn a law passed by Congress. So it would really affect the balance of power and the checks and balances between the different branches. So the only way this is going to happen is if you get a Democrat president, Democrat Senate and House, and they're able to shove this through. Now changing, so again, that's the Democrats really have demonized the court and gone after them in a serious way. So is this good? No, I think it's another example of the rancor and lack of civility. Instead of making better arguments and figure out what needs to happen with the court, attacking the Supreme Court, again, it shows a lack of judicial deference and respect for the rule of law. That's my opinion. Moving forward, I don't even know if I was sharing that. Let's make sure we share this article. This is kind of scary. Again, the Trump campaign was hacked a while back, and now they're indicting people because of that. The plot to hack the Trump campaign. It was a success, and they did get plenty of information from the Trump campaign. The indictment should be unsealed today, as soon as today. And again, this is Watergate, times 10, essentially, right in the middle of the campaign season, and the media is very, very quiet about this. So that's all there is to that article. So, and again, we want to move through these last articles fairly quickly. This came out today, or yesterday, actually the 25th. And again, the Senate came out with the public report on the first Trump assassination attempt. This committee has actually broadened their scope to look at the second attempt that happened while they were looking at this. It's a 94-page report. The Secret Service had credible intelligence of a threat before the rally, but that information was not disseminated well. Again, only 2 people were aware of it, and only one person was made aware of the classified information underlying the threat. So again, there was a very poor coordination between local law enforcement, between the Secret Service and other agencies helping out. And his status was not relayed. Again, just failure to communicate. Technical difficulties. I mean, it was just a storm of plenty of problems plaguing the Secret Service. If you want to read into it more, I'm going to go ahead and post it and link the site. Regardless of who is being protected, I think the Secret Service needs to make some massive improvements, because any kind of assassination attempts like that are a huge blow to our democracy. Okay, Trump targeting Nancy Pelosi again. She's still a huge power broker in D.C., as we saw when she was one of the key people getting Biden to step down, in his campaign. Now, to be fair to Pelosi, she's not the only one that does this, and it's a tragedy. It is a national shame that it is not illegal for congressmen and senators to do insider trading. They have specifically exempted themselves from this. If anybody else did this, they would clearly be thrown in jail. Trump is absolutely right about that. But the law allows our legislators to do that, which is a shame. So her husband, who's, again, been hand in hand with Pelosi from day one, sold, I think it was about 500,000 of Visa stock one day before a big lawsuit was made public. You don't think he had insider information about that? And the stock dropped 5% right after they announced it. Again, there is, Paul Pelosi sold about $500,000 worth. It was nearly 3 months before the Justice Department announced the civil antitrust lawsuit, but these things leak out. And so, it's par for the course. Pelosi is one of the worst at doing it, but there are Republicans that do it too. It is not just Democrats. And so this is part of the corruption that runs very deep in our Congress, with senators and congressmen. So I do hope whoever comes to office that they take this seriously. They stop the corruption that runs very deep. And there's a reason they call the Washington, D.C. the swamp. Unfortunately, it is all too true in many respects. This is an important article. I did want to touch on this, and again, it has to do with China being a huge threat to our country, and trying to undermine us in many ways. So the former head of DEA Special Operations says people are treating it as a drug issue. It's not a drug issue. It's the number one threat to our national security. We see homeless people every single day. We get 70,000 overdoses a year from fentanyl. And it's getting worse. So again, some pretty scary pictures here showing how China is funneling through Mexico billions of dollars in fentanyl that is hurting and killing Americans. So more than 100,000 Americans died last year of overdose. 70,000 overdose on synthetic opioids such as fentanyl. Fentanyl being the biggest culprit right now. We're pouring billions into addiction treatment. But again, you can't fight because you can get these drugs on any corner throughout the country. Where is it coming from? Across the southern border with Mexico. Where are the chemicals coming from? So these drugs are getting processed in Mexico, who is not our friend on this. They're pretty much sold out to all the drug cartels in this latest presidency. Again, if you talk to Mexicans, and I've talked to a few Mexican nationals, they are very, very frustrated and upset, and I think this last election was a fraud. Again, you had over 70 people assassinated going into their election, which, again, really it's hard to have a democracy when a lot of the politicians are just killed off if they don't toe the line with cartels. And it's not just one party, it's multiple parties that had people, individual candidates assassinated if they weren't going to play along with the cartels. So it's coming from the southern border of Mexico, but the chemicals for this are being made in China and then shipped to Mexico to press them into pills. And again, this is the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, is doing most of this. So again, any regulation, the experts are dismissing as cosmetic. It's just for show. And this is a chemical war that we're facing. Here's the scary part. So the CCP is actively involved in this. You have Chinese-made pill presses to allow for the production of counterfeit pills. And Chinese organized crime groups, which, again, there's a reason most of the fraud is coming, or identity theft is coming out of China, because they're making billions off of ripping off American customers. They're also making billions off of sending very nasty drugs across our border to hook and addict people. And again, it's here they accuse, the experts suggest that China's lack of cooperation and hey, we'll do this or that. That doesn't really solve the problem. Hint at intentionality that China is doing this intentionally, which, again, we should assume that we're from China because it's not this. It's on market, currency manipulation. It's on trying to undercut our domestic industries. One of the things I want to wrap up with here that's not just fentanyl anymore. They're increasingly trafficking synthetic drugs even more powerful than fentanyl. And from what I understand, fentanyl is a horse tranquilizer. So the new drugs coming out are xylazine and nitrazines. I've never heard of these, but it's they can't be reversed by naloxone. So if you have overdoses, again, this is something that a drug that stops overdoses caused by opioids, including fentanyl. But these new drugs, synthetic drugs that are being produced and shipped, the chemicals for these are being produced in China, shipped to Mexico, where then they turn them into pills to ship across the border. They can't be reduced. And again, what they causes tissue necrosis. So it causes your tissue to actually die and start rotting from within. This is designed to kill people, and again, more powerful than fentanyl, give people a greater high, but to kill them even quicker with, where the addictions are, you can't just reverse it using the normal drugs that we use. So they're being designed at this time to hurt people and hurt and kill Americans. So again, very scary article here. I think it's very important. Pressure on the CCP in Mexico. Our border is wide open. So all those chemicals are coming in, and they're coming in freely because people are being paid off and the Mexican government allows it. And we have no control over our borders. So the cartels largely control the border. It goes on with the damage and how we could make some changes to accept it. But this is one of the consequences of having an open border. It is killing Americans. And if you think the problem isn't going to get worse, it will. Very scary, very sad to see that this is happening. We're running out of time. One quick article, and this is from Newsmax Money, and just trying to be balanced here. Yellen says the economy is on the path to soft landing. She says that the labor market is strong, which flies in the face of all the data recently. And she's claiming that inflation is down as well. This is the same person that said inflation was transitory back in 2003 and 2002 and 2003. I don't trust her as far as I can throw her. But again, she's the Treasury Secretary. You'd think she knows something. But again, be very careful with what she says. But again, I'm going to go and post this. We'll see what actually happens with inflation moving forward. But there's a lot of time bombs out there. We're hitting a break. We'll be right back after that. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to stop talking about Helene. It's just frustrating and scary when we're told one thing by the government and by our leaders, and it turns out to be very misleading. So if you buy that inflation is transitory, even someone that has told some huge whoppers like Yellen might be a broken clock can still be right twice a day. But I wouldn't trust it. I wouldn't take it to the bank. We've shared things how there's huge debts and issues, financial issues that have not been addressed that are expected to explode on the scene after the election. So again, the government is really good about hiding the ball, and there's been a huge lack of transparency. And again, we want more government transparency, and we're getting less. We want more accountability, and we're getting less. So again, a lot of issues with how the government is running, and the IRS too. So shifting gears to the topic of the day, I didn't save enough time, but again, just want to preview this. I'm trying to get a state and corporate attorney to come on the show, and so we can really do a much deeper dive into this. But if you are not planning for your future, the eventualities of what if, you're doing it too late. So don't wait until emergencies happen. Again, it becomes a huge problem to try to make adjustments and plan for emergencies when it's too late. So if someone loses capacity, they get injured, they have mental issues. I've run into all of that. I just had a case recently, true case, where someone came in, wanted to make sure his long-term girlfriend and his daughter were taken care of and that they got their assets. And he wanted to make sure that they avoided probate. So he had just been told by the doctors that he only had 4 months left to live. It's kind of scary. And so he had gone in and created a trust well after when he owed taxes. Technically, again, it's one of those things that technically that money should have gone to the IRS, but when he passed away, because he used a trust, he was able to pass the money on to his beneficiaries, the people he wanted the money to go to. They didn't have to go through probate. They didn't have to fight it. If the IRS scrutinized that case, it absolutely could have been a huge problem, but they avoided doing that by making sure that he didn't have a probate, that he had nothing left really to go through probate. So there are various ways to do that, and it depends on the state you're in. Some states, Arizona's pretty good about letting people avoid probate, as long as your assets fall within certain parameters. There are, every state is different. New York, California can be a lot stricter when it comes to that, and mainly because they want to capture and impose estate taxes, which have gone up dramatically, or expected to go up dramatically with the new administration. But also, there's New York has very high estate taxes as well. Now, can a trust protect your assets while you're still alive? Absolutely. Absolutely. So the key here is that you have to have assets in a valid trust, and the trust should be set up and the assets should be transferred before you are aware of a debt or that you've incurred a debt. So if you know that there's going to be a problem, you need to, it really is too late, because then you're using the trust to avoid current liabilities. But good planning is that you take the trust, and it's like a company, it's considered its own legal entity. And if you put assets into the trust and create some distance where legally you can't just go and grab these assets and use them, it can protect them from tax debt. It can protect them from other liabilities. And so, again, it's not absolute, but it can definitely help you out. So, again, we've had cases where, where someone had someone pass away, and they already had assets in a trust, and the IRS couldn't touch it as long as the trust was valid. So this is something I'm going to highlight not only for people with businesses, especially with businesses though, because there's a lot of liability. Creating a trust and using trust and estate law to put some or estate planning to put some distance between you and your assets, and especially assets that you want to pass on, is absolutely helpful. It is a very smart thing to do, and the best. I mean, again, if you've never sat down with an estate attorney, there are plenty of estate attorneys where you can get a consultation that's fairly reasonable. And yes, it's going to cost you a few $1,000s to sit down and make a plan. But if you have a home, if you have retirement accounts, if you have any kind of an estate, you need that planning. So one of the things I'm going to do is a public service announcement. If you do not have some of the basic power of attorneys in place, durable power of attorney, a living will, healthcare directives, you need to do that. And the reason for that is if something happens to you and you don't have these things put into place, your family might not be able to see you in the hospital. They might not be able to talk to you. They might not be able to make decisions for you. So my own father passed away back in 2019, bless his soul. And but he didn't have any of this in place. My mom had to make the decision as to whether or not to pull the plug. Now, my brother and I both flew up there as soon as my dad, or drove up there as soon as we found out that he had a very serious accident. And by the time we got up there, he was already having seizures and he was brain dead. So this hits home to me. And my brother, after a couple of days, he pulled me aside and said, hey, and he's my older brother. And he said, if we need to pull the plug, I want you to back me on this so mom doesn't have to make that decision. And I said, absolutely. And it didn't come to that because my mom was able to come to peace and let him go. But that is a horrible decision to make. And I think that was through a lot of prayer, having a family surround her. About that time, my sisters had come and my other brother, so she had 4 of her kids around her at that time, and she was able to make a decision that she could be at peace with. Don't put that burden on your family. Don't put that, and that was, my brother was ready to make the decision for her, but she came to us, and I think that was the 3rd day he was in the hospital, and said, he's gone. And the doctor even said, look, I'm not treating him anymore. I'm treating you as his family. Make a decision as to whether or not you want someone to pull the plug, if you want to be kept alive as long as possible, if you want to donate your organs. These are all decisions that you should make so your family, your grieving family, doesn't have to deal with that. Again, this is all part of wise planning, so that way people aren't upset with you when they should be grieving for you. This is kind of a hard topic to tackle, but it is so important that not only do you get those basic things, healthcare directive, power of attorney, not with the IRS, but it's a durable power of attorney to make financial decisions for them. So there's the ability to make decisions in the hospital. There's the ability to make financial decisions for someone. And you should make arrangements to put people on your bank account or make them co-signers, something. But you've got to watch out for that, because if you put someone as a co-signer on your bank account and they have any tax issues, the IRS or state very well might hit your bank. The owner of the bank might hit their bank accounts too. So be very aware of that. If they have control over it as a trustee, that's very different. So again, and you have to make sure that you are using people you can trust, because there's plenty of stories of people being taken advantage of. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns by people. If they can't trust their relatives, there are fiduciaries out there. There are people that do this for a living that can put assets into there. So once you have things set up and you have a business, let's say you have a business or you have financial assets that are put into a trust, they're outside of your reach. And you can even have a mechanism where in an emergency you can access it, or a family member can access the funds and help you out. Just make sure they're people you can trust. And you can also have provisions where you can go in and revise the trust or change the trustee. So if someone isn't doing what you want them to do, you can remove them from their place and just make sure that you have provisions in place for that. So wise planning. But when you do get tax debt, because sometimes it just happens, we can't foresee it. Medical bills is another big thing. If you do have these assets, they can't go after them if they're protected in trust. So it all comes to wise planning for the eventualities, the what ifs. That's what attorneys are good at, is helping people protect themselves and their loved ones from dealing with these issues when life happens. We're only here for a limited time on this earth. But if you plan wisely, you can protect yourself during this life from eventualities, but also, make it easy on your family when something happens. And there are plenty of ways to plan. Life insurance is part of that if needed. So what I highly recommend, there are free seminars going out. I'm going to throw a plug out here locally in Tucson, in the Greater Valley area. There's one happening next week. Throughout Texas and Louisiana, there are plenty of free seminars as well where you can get some of this information. If you need to connect with somebody to get this information and where do I start, give us a call at 520-485-7371. We do not do this kind of work, but we work with estate planners, financial professionals across the country. And in January, I'll be speaking at a seminar put on by an estate planning team and an office. So again, something we do deal with and work with estate planners with on a regular basis. And it can be as complicated or as simple as you want it. If you have multiple businesses, each one should be in their own trust. Again, it can be as complicated as you need or as simple as you need. I highly recommend that you keep it simple. Biggest problem people run into when trust planning and doing durable power of attorneys, healthcare directives, is they don't revisit it. They do these, they tuck them away somewhere, and then they forget about them. Life happens. Someone that you were hunky-dory with 5 years ago, you might not be so happy with today. People get divorced, they get estranged, you have more kids, you have more grandkids. That all happens, and you can't anticipate everything when doing a plan. So this is why it's so important to review your plan regularly. And what I'm touching on is just the very, very basics of estate planning and incorporation with corporate planning. Again, forming a corporation will absolutely help you. If that business fails, you can definitely separate yourself from tax liability, government liability, other creditors where they can't come after you personally. And adding an additional layer of estate planning through wills and trusts, worth their weight in gold when it happens. And it takes that pressure and the stress off of the shoulders of your family members when they should be grieving the most. Maybe this is on my mind a lot because we just had a death in our family. Yesterday, my wife found out that her stepfather had passed away. And again, it's just one of those things that needs to be handled. He had been sick for quite some time. And when is the best time to do all this? Now. If you wait until it's too late, it can be a huge problem. We had a huge case, very nasty case. Not nasty, very difficult case, I should say, where you had two people where one person started to get dementia, and so the wife got full access on him, and then the wife started to get dementia as well, and they had a horrible time getting a power of attorney. A lot of attorneys won't touch it for estate planning purposes because they have to show competency, and that opens them up to a lot of lawsuits and can make things very difficult. So if you wait too long, it's possible that you won't be able to do it, but check with an estate attorney, talk to an expert in that area. Again, if you need help and direction, give us a call, 520-485-7371, or reach out to us through guardiantaxlaw.com. You can send a message through that directly to us and help you and your family prepare for these situations and eventualities. I hope everybody has a great weekend. And if you have further questions, let us know, or you can find all these topics on our website as well. So have a great day. I hope this has been informative. A lot of good news out there, some scary news out there, because again, this is a scary time in many ways. But take care and God bless.